10%? 10%? Garrick's laughter echoed off the glass walls of his corner office, bouncing around me like razor blades. You want a 10% raise after what? 12 years? That's... He couldn't even finish his sentence before another wave of laughter shook his shoulders. I stood frozen, clutching my portfolio of achievements, the tangible proof of my value. The 60-page document containing every algorithm, every process improvement, every late night I'd sacrificed while he collected bonuses large enough to buy vacation homes. The system I designed cut delivery times in half, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. The Eastwood account alone. Garrick waved his hand dismissively, still chuckling as he leaned back in his chair. Everyone's replaceable, you know. Even you. He stared at me with that practiced CEO smile that never reached his eyes. If you think you're worth more, try your luck elsewhere. I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, something deeper. The foundation of 12 years of loyalty, of believing that eventually hard work would be recognized. I understand, I said quietly, collecting my portfolio. The pages trembled between my fingers. Listen, Garrick's voice softened with artificial concern. You're good at what you do, but you're a back office function. The board doesn't even know your name. That's just business. That's when I knew exactly what I would do. I'm Ivy, by the way, 34 years old, supply chain algorithm specialist, and until that moment, pathologically afraid of conflict. The kind of woman who apologizes when someone steps on her foot. The woman who stayed at the same company for 12 years despite being paid 20% below market rate because I believed in loyalty. Because I thought my work would eventually speak for itself. Before I go any further with this story, I'd really appreciate if you could take a second to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This happened in the Midwest, but I want to know if stories like mine resonate everywhere. And if this is something you've experienced too, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you might save you years of your own life. I walked back to my cubicle, yes, cubicle, after 12 years, past the glass-walled offices of managers who'd been at the company half as long as me. My desk sat in the corner of the 5th floor, surrounded by empty workstations. Our department had shrunk from 15 people to just 3 over the years, not because we needed fewer people, but because my algorithms had automated so much. My computer screen showed an email notification, the quarterly company newsletter with a feature on how Garrick's innovative supply chain revolution had saved our biggest client, Eastwood. My revolution. My 18-hour days for 6 months straight. My solution that cut their logistics costs by 40%. Beside my keyboard sat the cold coffee I'd abandoned 3 hours ago when I'd finally gathered the courage to ask for that raise. Beside it, a framed photo of my parents. Dad worked 35 years at the same factory before they closed it down. Loyalty matters, he always said. Mom nodded along, believing it too. I opened my drawer and pulled out a small leather notebook. Inside were ideas I'd jotted down over the years. My personal projects, documented meticulously with dates, times, and development notes. Ideas I'd explored on weekends, refined on my own laptop, built on my own time. Ideas the company had implemented without formal acquisition because I'd been too accommodating, too eager to prove my worth. I flipped through the pages, stopping at my notes from 3 years ago. A series of algorithms that became the backbone of our entire distribution system. At the top of the page, my handwriting, personal project, supply chain optimization through predictive modeling, began 11 by 14, home system. What Garrick never knew, what the company's legal department had been too careless to investigate, was that I'd never signed over the rights to these personal innovations. The boilerplate employment contract covered work done during company time using company resources. My most valuable creations were documented as personal projects developed on my own equipment during my own time. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I'd saved but never called. Hayden, the operations director at our largest competitor, had reached out multiple times over the years. His last message, sent 6 months ago, "The offer still stands whenever you're ready. We value innovators here." My fingers hovered over the call button. 12 years of loyalty screamed at me to stop, to be reasonable, to not burn bridges. Then I remembered Garrick's laughter. I pressed call. Hayden speaking. This is Ivy Reeves from Porter Logistics Solutions. I paused, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I believe we should finally have that conversation. Ivy! Excitement rippled through his voice. I was beginning to think you'd never call. Are you free for dinner tonight? 5 hours later, I sat across from Hayden at a restaurant that required reservations weeks in advance. He'd made one call. I followed your work for years, Hayden said, studying me over his water glass. Or rather, I've followed the sudden leaps in Porter's capabilities that mysteriously coincided with gaps in your LinkedIn activity. Those supply chain algorithms for the Eastwood account were revolutionary. I felt a tightness in my chest. How did you know that was me? Hayden smiled. Because Garrick doesn't have the technical background to understand even the basics of what those algorithms do, let alone create them. And because we tried to reverse engineer them and couldn't, that's when I knew we needed the mind behind them. I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. What exactly are you offering? Leadership position, triple your current salary, stock options, a team of your own. He leaned forward. But more importantly, recognition. Your name on your work. And if I brought my personal innovations with me, theoretical systems I developed on my own time, using my own resources? Something flickered in Hayden's eyes. Understanding. He nodded slowly. We have a proper IP acquisition process with fair compensation. Unlike some companies, we don't expect to own our employees' personal creative output. I pulled out my leather notebook and placed it on the table. I have documentation proving these systems were personal projects. Porter implemented them, but they never formally acquired them. Hayden's eyes widened slightly as he grasped the implications. That's quite an oversight on their legal team's part. Garrick doesn't value back-office functions, I said, echoing the CEO's words. Including legal, apparently. 2 weeks later, I placed my resignation letter on Garrick's desk. He barely looked up from his computer. 2 weeks' notice? He scanned the letter. Where are you going? I considered lying, but decided truth had more impact. Radius Shipping Solutions. That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Our competitor? That's unfortunate timing. We're in final negotiations with Eastwood to expand our contract. I know, I said. I built the delivery model for that proposal. Garrick's expression shifted from surprise to something resembling concern. We should discuss retention options. Perhaps that raise you mentioned. The offer from Radius is triple my current salary, plus leadership position and stock options. He laughed, but it sounded hollow now. They're overpaying. You'll be disappointed when they realize you can't possibly deliver what they're expecting. I smiled, feeling a strange new confidence. We'll see. My last 2 weeks were oddly peaceful. I completed my transition documents, trained my replacement, a recent graduate who seemed both terrified and impressed by the systems he was inheriting, and backed up my personal project documentation. I also made copies of all emails where I'd shared my personal innovations with the company without formal transfer of ownership. On my final day, I met with our legal counsel, Vance, who handled my exit interview. Just routine questions, he assured me, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. Standard non-compete, confidentiality agreements, affirmation that you're not taking company property. I reviewed the documents carefully. I'm not signing the non-compete. Vance blinked. It's standard procedure. It wasn't in my original employment contract, and I'm not agreeing to it now. I met his gaze steadily. And regarding company property, I'm not taking anything that belongs to Porter. I am, however, taking my personal intellectual property that was never formally acquired by the company. What personal property? Vance's forehead creased. I opened my notebook, showing him my dated entries. These algorithms and systems were developed on my personal time, using my personal resources. Porter implemented them but never completed any IP acquisition process. I have the documentation to prove it. Vance's expression changed as he flipped through my notebook, recognition dawning. These are the core systems we use for everything. I finished for him. Yes. He stared at me, then at the notebook. I need to make some calls. Of course, I said, closing the notebook and standing up. But my employment ends today, and my personal property leaves with me. I walked out of Porter's Glass headquarters for the last time at 5:17 p.m. on a Friday. By Monday morning, I was sitting in my new corner office at Radius, explaining to my team of 5 algorithm specialists, how we were going to revolutionize the industry. 6 weeks later, the first implementation of my systems went live at Radius. Delivery times dropped by 30%. Operating costs fell by 25%. Our sales team approached Eastwood with data showing we could outperform Porter's best metrics by a significant margin. The morning Eastwood announced they were switching their contract to Radius, my phone rang. Garrick's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times before leaving a message. Ivy, this is Garrick. We need to talk immediately about consulting opportunities. Porter is prepared to offer a substantial compensation package. Please call me back as soon as possible. I saved the message but didn't return the call. 2 days later, Garrick was waiting beside my car in the Radius parking garage. This is inappropriate, I said, keeping my distance. You've put 300 jobs at risk, he said, his voice low and urgent. Porter is facing a crisis because of what you took. I didn't take anything that belonged to Porter, I replied calmly. I took my personal intellectual property that Porter used without proper acquisition. Nobody will believe that. It looks like corporate espionage. I have dated documentation of every personal project, every implementation, and every conversation where ownership was never transferred. Your legal team never did their job, and you never valued mine enough to care. Garrick stepped closer, desperation evident in his eyes. Name your price. Whatever Radius is paying, we'll double it. I thought about those 12 years, about sitting in my cubicle while he took credit for my work, about the laughter when I asked for a modest raise after saving the company millions. You once told me everyone's replaceable, I said quietly. Even me. I'm just following your business advice. The following quarter, Porter's stock fell 62%. They laid off 200 employees. The news articles described it as a catastrophic loss of technical capability and mysterious deterioration of their award-winning logistics systems. Garrick resigned under pressure from the board. I watched the announcement from my office while finalizing the implementation plans for 3 new major clients who had switched from Porter to Radius. Then came the lawsuit. Porter sued me for theft of intellectual property. Their case collapsed when my documentation proved I had developed the core algorithms as personal projects. The judge dismissed the case, noting that Porter had failed to secure proper ownership of the innovations they had implemented. The morning after the case was dismissed, I received a visitor at Radius, Garrick, looking nothing like the confident CEO who had laughed at me months earlier. You destroyed everything, he said, standing in my office doorway. No, I corrected him. You did that when you decided some people were disposable. Those people who lost their jobs, they weren't just statistics. They had families, mortgages. I felt the weight of his words, the moral complexity of what had happened. I know. That's why Radius has hired 57 former Porter employees in the last 3 months. People who weren't responsible for your decisions shouldn't suffer for them. Garrick stared at me, searching for something in my expression. You planned all of this? No. I simply stopped allowing myself to be undervalued. I met his gaze directly. You could have prevented this entire situation with a 10% raise and basic respect. He left without another word. I watched through my office window as he crossed the parking lot, shoulders hunched, former CEO of what had once been the industry leader. That evening, I received an email from Eastwood's procurement director. The implementation exceeded our expectations. Delivery times are 40% better than our previous provider. The board has approved expanding our contract with Radius. I forwarded it to Hayden with a simple note. This is just the beginning. My name now appears on the algorithm patents. My picture hangs in the lobby alongside other Radius executives. My team has grown to 15 people, including many former Porter employees who now receive the recognition and compensation they deserve. Sometimes I think about those who lost their jobs at Porter and couldn't find new positions. The collateral damage of Garrick's arrogance. It's the weight I carry. The knowledge that justice for one person can mean hardship for others who were simply in the wrong place. But I also think about that moment in Garrick's office, when he laughed at my request for basic fairness after years of loyalty. How many others had he treated the same way? How many careers had he stunted with his belief that people were replaceable parts in his corporate machine? 6 months into my new role at Radius, the full impact of my decision was still unfolding. Porter's stock hadn't recovered. Industry analysts were writing case studies about their catastrophic talent management failure. Meanwhile, Radius had claimed 23% of Porter's market share. My office phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. The receptionist's voice sounded hesitant. "There's someone here to see you. She says she worked at Porter." When I walked to the lobby, I found Marlene standing there. She'd been Porter's head of customer service for 15 years, longer than I'd been there. We'd eaten lunch together sometimes, commiserated about Garrick's leadership style. Now she clutched her purse with white knuckles. "Ivy," she said, her voice brittle. "I thought maybe we could talk." I brought her to my office, offered her water, coffee. She declined both. "I lost my job last week," she said without preamble, "along with my entire department, 37 people." The weight of her words settled in my chest. "Marlene, I'm so sorry." "Are you?" Her eyes fixed on mine. "Everyone's saying you're the reason Porter's falling apart, that you stole something and brought it here." I didn't steal anything. I explained my personal project documentation, the legal victory. She listened without expression. "I'm 56 years old, Ivy. Who's going to hire me now?" I leaned forward. "Radius will. We need experienced customer service leadership. I can speak to Hayden today." She shook her head. "I didn't come here for a job." "Then why did you come?" Marlene looked around my office. The view, the sleek furniture, the nameplate on my door. "I wanted to see if it was worth it, if whatever you got was worth what happened to the rest of us." The question lodged in my throat like a stone. Was it worth it? The recognition, the compensation, the validation, measured against the collateral damage to people who'd done nothing wrong except work for the wrong company? "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," I said finally. "I just wanted what I'd earned." "We all want that." Marlene stood up. "Some of us just can't take an entire company down when we don't get it." After she left, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. My phone buzzed with a text from Hayden. Quarterly numbers exceeded projections by 18%. "Celebration dinner tonight?" I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. In the first column, I listed every Porter employee I knew had lost their job. Next to each name, I researched their LinkedIn profiles, noting their experience and skills. By midnight, I had a database of 212 people. The next morning, I walked into Hayden's office without knocking. "We need to talk about Porter's former employees." Hayden looked up from his monitor. "What about them?" I placed my spreadsheet on his desk. "These are people who lost their jobs because of Porter's collapse. Radius has benefited enormously from what happened. We have a responsibility." He studied the list. "We've already hired quite a few." "Not enough." I sat down across from him. "I want to propose a formal recruitment initiative targeting Porter's displaced workers. And for those we can't hire directly, I want to fund placement services and training programs." Hayden leaned back in his chair, studying me. "That's an expensive proposition for people who don't work for us." "It's an investment in our reputation and our future," I countered. "And it's the right thing to do." After a long moment, he nodded. "Draft the proposal. I'll take it to the board." 3 weeks later, Operation Rebound launched. Radius committed to interviewing every qualified former Porter employee. We partnered with 3 training companies to offer skills updates for those needing transition assistance. For employees nearing retirement, we created part-time consulting opportunities. The industry took notice. Business journals wrote about Radius's innovative approach to competitor displacement. Applications to our open positions increased by 300%. Clients mentioned our corporate responsibility during sales meetings. Marlene called me the day after the program was announced. "Was this your doing?" "Yes," I admitted. "Would you reconsider coming to Radius?" A pause. "Maybe. As a consultant, not an employee." I'm too old to start over completely. We need your expertise. Name your terms. 2 days later, she was setting up in an office down the hall from mine. Not everyone was as receptive. Jason, Porter's former operations manager, refused my call. Patrice from accounting sent a scathing email about loyalty and betrayal. I saved it in a folder labeled Consequences, my growing collection of reminders that revenge is never as clean as it seems in movies. 8 months after I left Porter, I received an unexpected email from Vance, their former legal counsel. Meeting for coffee? There's something you should know. We met at a small cafe halfway between our offices. Vance had aged visibly. New lines around his eyes, gray hair at his temples that hadn't been there before. I was let go last month, he said, stirring his coffee. Part of the latest round of cuts. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Radius is hiring legal. He shook his head. That's not why I wanted to talk. It's about your algorithms, your documentation. I tensed. The court already ruled on that. I know, and they ruled correctly. Vance leaned closer. But there's something you don't know. After you first mentioned your personal projects in the exit interview, I went to Garrick immediately, told him we needed to investigate your claims before taking any action. And he showed me emails. From 3 years ago, you had actually sent him detailed explanations of your algorithms, asking if the company wanted to formally acquire them. You even suggested fair compensation terms. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. I don't remember that. You CC'd me on them. I found them in our archive during the legal preparation. Garrick had replied to you, dismissing the need for formal acquisition. Said something like, just implement it if it works. We'll sort out the details later. He knew? All this time? Vance nodded. He knew exactly what you had created, that you had documented it as personal work, and that the company never properly acquired it. When you left and Radius started implementing your systems, he came to legal demanding we sue you, despite knowing he had no case. I told him that, showed him his own emails. He ordered me to proceed anyway. Vance sipped his coffee. That's when I knew Porter deserved what was happening. I sat back, processing this revelation. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to know something important. Vance met my eyes. What happened to Porter wasn't just about you taking your intellectual property elsewhere. It was about years of systemic arrogance. Garrick didn't just undervalue you. He did it to everyone. Legal, operations, customer service. He treated the entire company like replaceable parts. And now those parts are working elsewhere, I said softly. Exactly. Your algorithms were brilliant, but Porter wouldn't have collapsed if Garrick had built a company that could withstand losing one person. He didn't just lose you. He lost the loyalty and institutional knowledge of hundreds of people who felt exactly as you did. I thought about this on my drive back to Radius. My revenge hadn't destroyed Porter. It had simply revealed what was already broken. That evening, I received another call from Garrick. I almost sent it to voicemail from habit, then decided to answer. Ivy. His voice sounded rough, tired. I'm calling to apologize. Of all the things I'd expected, this wasn't one of them. I'm listening. I knew about your personal projects. I knew you documented them properly, I thought. He paused. I thought you were too loyal to ever leave, so it didn't matter. You misjudged me. I misjudged everything. The admission seemed to cost him. The board removed me completely yesterday. Porter's filing for Chapter 11 next week. Bankruptcy. I hadn't expected things to go that far. I'm sorry about the employees. That's why I'm calling. There's a final board meeting tomorrow. They're deciding severance packages. I want to recommend your Radius program for our remaining staff. You want to send Porter's employees to Radius? I want them to have jobs, Garrick said simply. Pride doesn't matter anymore. After we hung up, I walked to the window of my apartment, looking out at the city lights. 12 years at Porter, working in obscurity. 8 months at Radius had transformed not just my career, but an entire industry landscape. The next day, Porter officially announced its bankruptcy filing. By afternoon, their remaining clients were calling Radius. Our sales team was overwhelmed. Hayden called an emergency leadership meeting. We need to scale up immediately to handle the influx, he told us. Ivy, your rebound program is now our top priority. We need every qualified Porter employee we can get. Within a month, Radius had hired 173 former Porter staff. Our operation expanded to 3 new locations. My team grew to 40 people, many of whom had once sat in cubicles near mine at Porter. Marlene became our Chief Customer Experience Officer. Jason eventually joined as operations consultant. Even Vance came aboard to help with our expanding legal needs. 1 year after I'd walked out of Garrick's office with my portfolio of achievements, I stood at a podium accepting the Industry Innovation Award. Cameras flashed as I looked out at the audience, many familiar faces from Porter now wearing Radius badges. Innovation isn't just about algorithms or systems, I said into the microphone. It's about recognizing the value in people, treating them as irreplaceable rather than disposable. The companies that understand this will always outperform those that don't. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She looked fresh out of college, nervous but determined. Ms. Reeves, I'm Tessa. I just started in algorithm development at Radius. Welcome to the team, Tessa. She clutched her portfolio, so similar to the one I'd held in Garrick's office that day. I wanted to ask, how did you know when to stand up for yourself? I'm just starting my career, and I don't want to make the same mistakes. I considered her question carefully. I waited 12 years too long. Don't do that. But aren't you worried about seeming difficult, ungrateful? I smiled. Those are labels people use when they want to pay you less than you're worth. As Tessa walked away, I noticed Garrick standing near the exit. Our eyes met across the room. He nodded once. Acknowledgement, perhaps respect. I nodded back. He had lost everything, but gained something too, understanding. I had gained everything I'd wanted professionally, but carried the weight of how it happened. We were both changed by that moment of laughter over a 10% raise request. 2 years after leaving Porter, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a framed article from the Wall Street Journal analyzing Porter's collapse and Radius's rise. A note was attached. You were never replaceable. I was Garrick. I hung it in my office as a reminder that value isn't determined by others. It's something you must recognize in yourself first. Last month, I launched a mentorship program for women in tech. Our first workshop focused on salary negotiation and intellectual property protection. 300 women attended. Marlene helped me organize it. Tessa, now leading her own team, was one of our speakers. At the end of the workshop, a participant asked me, "Don't you feel bad about what happened to Porter?" I considered the question carefully before answering. I feel responsible for my actions, but not guilty for claiming what was rightfully mine. The difference matters. As I look back now, I understand that true revenge wasn't watching Porter collapse or seeing Garrick lose his position. It wasn't even my corner office or industry award. Real revenge was discovering my own worth and refusing to let anyone discount it again. It was creating a workplace where people like me, people like the person I used to be, would never need to wait 12 years for recognition. If you're watching this and questioning your own value in your workplace, remember, loyalty is admirable, but it should flow both ways. Document your achievements, know your worth, and never, ever apologize for asking to be valued appropriately. The algorithms I created were complex, but the lesson was simple. No one determines your value but you. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who might be sitting in a cubicle right now, wondering if they should speak up. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding your voice in spaces designed to silence it. And leave a comment letting me know if you've ever had to make a similar choice between loyalty and self-worth. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to be replaceable.